Hi, Inspies. Welcome to Inspirational Latinos. I have the pleasure to talk about money. I was very fortunate enough to interview Natalie Torres Haddad. She is an award-winning author of Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, and she has been speaking across the United States to Hispanics about finance and why it's important for them to focus on their finances and what they should be doing. The great thing about Natalie is that she's straight to the point. She tells you exactly how it is. She understands that your time is valuable, which is one of the reasons why in her podcast she is highlighting millionaires that basically are giving you tips in 20 minutes or less. If you want to become an investor, a real estate investor, this is definitely one of the episodes to watch. Welcome, Natalie Torres Haddad. I'm so excited to have you. This is so awesome for you to be with us. Just a little bit about yourself. I know that you are an author, you are a financial specialist, and an investor. You've won awards. You're a nonprofit founder. I mean, the list goes on. When I read your bio, I was like, wow, that is a lot of accomplishments with such a small amount of time. And I love that. Tell me about yourself. What has been your journey? A little bit of background of who you are and, how you grew up in the West Coast and everything else.
I think I'm like most people that I come across that are like true entrepreneurs. You can say it's like we always have 1,000 ideas, right? And, just kind of pinpointing things like, oh yeah, someday maybe this, or how about this, or creating something like this, because there's always something that's missing, right? The need of maybe solving a problem or just kind of maybe something different. So my journey has been, it's always a journey, it's an adventure, and that's what it really is. It's a roller coaster, let's just be honest too. There's moments where you're like, what am I doing? This is crazy, or it's an epic fail for most people. At least I know that I tried it instead of thinking I didn't do that. So anything that I have done, I'm not a perfectionist by far, but at least I know that I always made sure I at least tried.
And you moved here when you were born here?
So I'm actually born in El Salvador and I was raised here. So I was just a baby when basically almost my entire family fled from El Salvador during the Civil War. So I was not even barely a year old, a little over a year old when they moved here. And my parents always had that thought that they would go back after the war would end, but they didn't know it was going to last literally over a decade. And so it was definitely an eye-opener in college when I really started to hone down and really understand more about who I was and where I came from. And it was a very difficult time to talk about that too, because my mother, she lost her brother who was killed during the war, and he was a civilian. And it was something that happened really abrupt, like they left within months of once the war hit where they lived. And so, being able to ask those questions, one, made me value more of the life that we have here. I knew how fortunate we were. I knew how fortunate education was in order to be able to provide for, our community.
Why did you decide to start LA Prom?
So with LA's Prom Closet, I had it for about 7 years, and I had actually started that nonprofit from a place of actually a very difficult time. For the first time in my life, I felt what it felt like to be depressed, and I remember coming home from my 4th funeral in less than 2 months, and for the first time, to have that many funerals in such a small capacity obviously affects me. But I also was, recent college grad. I was working. My lifestyle was not the same once you were in college, and I remember just feeling overwhelmed and depressed and not knowing what to do with myself. And the funny thing is, for me, the only thing I felt I could control at the time was to clean. So I started to clean my room, and in my closet, I came across I actually came across a few dresses, and one of them being my prom dress. And I remember thinking, who can I give this dress to? All my nieces and cousins were already, past the age. And I had an idea. I go, look, I'm sure my other friends, my other sorority sisters have, cocktail gowns, bridesmaid dresses. And so I immediately started calling a few of my friends and told them this idea of like, hey, what if we help 5 girls go to prom? We'll give them dresses, we'll give them some options that they could try on, and, I'll pay for their shoes, makeup, whatever they need. That way they don't have to worry about prom because it's so expensive. So those 5 girls that we set out to help ended up being 45 girls for the first event. And everyone's like, oh, you're going to do this all the time? I'm like, okay, sure, we'll do it yearly. Every year it grew. It got to a point where we're having over 300 girls per event, and we had over 100 volunteers. So easy at an event, we had close to about 1,000 people come by. And during those LA Prom Closet events, we started incorporated workshops from the very first event that we did, because I was like, I want to teach these girls about financial literacy, and I wanted them to know that I didn't come from money, that this is something they can do. They can, start organizations, and it happened. A lot of high school girls started doing their own prom closets. But I told them financial literacy is key because I don't want you seeing so much debt while you're in college or feel that you can't go to college because you don't have the money.
And that's how you propelled into financially savvy?
Financially, yeah. So after doing that, actually right out of grad school, I started being asked right away to do exit loan workshops for universities because I told them how fast I got out of my debt. And I started doing these workshops, and I'm like, I really love doing this. I can do this more often. And I attended this boot camp that they had in LA for business owners, and I was one of the 100 that won. That was the I don't remember how many women actually attend the events, but you had to compete. And so we got this really cool boot camp, and all of a sudden people were like, oh, you must be the financially savvy Latina. And it used to be just financially savvy because my book is financially savvy in 20 minutes. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'll own it. I am Latina. So that's how the name came about, or coined pretty much. Now I get hired not just because I teach about financial literacy, which very few people want to do that, but I'm also a woman of color. I talk about being Latina. I talk about being an immigrant. I talk about being first-generation college student. And that there's very few people that obviously know what the struggle is. So I think that's something that's really helped me, and I never knew that would be part of my niche. But it's basically learning to own who you are and owning your truth. And it's not always easy, and it's sometimes very embarrassing, having to be vulnerable. I mean, that's what I did on my TED Talk. I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Why did I share all that? But I knew it was for a purpose.
In talking about the TED Talk, I actually saw the video that you were talking. You were driving, and you were talking about how nervous you were and how much work it took and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is so real. How was that experience? How were you able to? I mean, first of all, congrats on that, because to get on it, let me tell you, it's not easy. A lot of people think, oh, it's just people pick and choose. No, it's not easy at all to be picked and choose and be part of it. So how was that process for you?
It's still a surreal moment. I'm not going to lie. It's definitely humbling when you get offered something like that. I mean, I always thought I'd want to do one when I was older, and I'm like, yeah, it's on my bucket list, but not like a reality. For some reason, I was like, it's just a dream, Mm-hmm. And you're right. It was a process for sure. I was offered the talk at the end of last year, and I kid you not, less than a couple weeks later, I get a call. My grandmother passed unexpectedly, and I felt like it changed my world upside down. And I'm like, oh my God, I have about 3 months not even 3 months, it was like 2.5 months to basically prep for my talk. And that's what I had thought I could, committed my time for, which I did. But it was very difficult because you have to be focused. There's a lot of writing that comes with it. There's a lot of drafts. There's a lot of presenting it too. And I flew out a couple times to the location, which it was in Davenport, Iowa. And I thought I knew what I wanted to talk about based on what the conference theme was, and then obviously financial literacy. But I had a coach who was telling me, he's like, okay, well, honestly, and I'll be honest, he made me cry the first time we had a conversation, because he goes, I'm not impressed with your resume. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, but I'll tell you why. And I appreciate him, and it's true too. I was like totally agree with him at the time, because he even said it. He's like, there's going to be people in the audience that are so overqualified, that are, educators, humanitarians, activists, all this, that probably have way more impressive resumes. But this is what I need to know from you. Why should anyone sit down and listen and hear your story for 10 minutes? Because at first I was like, yeah, this is what I've done, or this is what, basically telling him my resume. And he goes, no. There's thousands of people that probably talk about financial literacy, but what makes you really love talking about it? And I'm like, trying to explain old student debt, and I was like, well, isn't there more? There's something that I can't Google or really, because he's like, I feel like there's something there that you're not telling me. And so then I started telling him my story of basically my breakdown and talking about the most difficult moments in my life till this day. I'm like crying and telling him, he goes, I'm sorry. He's like, I'm sorry to need to make you cry, but he's like, honestly, my jaw's dropping just listening to you tell your story now. And I appreciate him saying that, because then it really allowed me to formulate a little bit of my story into how I explain financial literacy and why I advocate more than anything, why we need more of that in our schools and at work. And so many people received it so well. People were like, oh my God, I went through something similar. Even after the conference, I had a lady that came up to me, and she was about in her 50s. She had been working for a company for 30 years, had just been laid off. And she said, oh my God, thank you for sharing that. Because she said, I thought I was dying because, the financial ruins that she was feeling. So these people are crying, and then I'm crying with them. And so, I think it was so not only humbling, struggling, but it also made me feel so inspired.
In our community, we're not taught about financial literacy. How can we change that in our community?
It's obviously not an easy topic for most people for many reasons, and I think the top ones that I usually come across, not just from my own personal experience, but speaking with clients and just, after conferences when people start telling me their story is, and one, it has to be, it comes down to a generation thing. So if your previous generation, like your parents or your grandparents, are always struggling with money, there's a reason, right? But, whatever we see our parents do, we're going to most likely emulate. It comes from also, at least speaking for Latinos in the United States, if you come from immigrant homes, trying to focus on just surviving, not necessarily building wealth, right? And that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book too, because as a student, college student, graduate, I graduated with a lot of student debt, and I felt most people that were advocating for financial literacy were shaming us, saying like, oh, you should have done this, or you should have. I'm like, okay, first of all, none of them represent people like me, that my parents are already struggling, working 2 jobs here and there, just to get us through. And the good thing is that it's fixable. It's going to take time. And I think in our cultures, if we have more education brought to the schools starting as young as possible, it will transform the entire family. Right now, my cousins are always asking me for like, what about this? My younger cousins, 2 of them actually, one's 22 and the other one just turned 28. That's their first rental properties. And they were so nervous about it. We're asking me all these questions. And I go, look, I totally know where you're coming from. It's the scariest thing because none of your friends and or family member are probably doing that when you're 20. But trust me, you're 30 or something myself will thank you for it.
You touch upon a very, very important aspect, the mental aspect of it, which is the poor mentality versus rich mentality, or the growth mentality, or however you want to call it. Can you touch upon that? I think?
Yes. So that's another whole workshop, how your relationship to money is, right? So people can definitely ask more questions on that, but just kind of give a little bit on that. Yes, it comes to, what did you hear your parents say often? So if you often heard, said, oh, what do you think, I'm made out of money, or money doesn't grow on trees, or, we're broke. The truth is, no matter what you tell yourself, you're right. That becomes your reality. And I remember once a lady said that, she's like, well, I still want to use the word I'm broke because then I feel like it'll limit me to budget myself. And I said, okay, I see where it's coming from. But I said, try to use it in a positive way and not using the word broke, but using it saying, I'm temporarily making money moves. So if I wanted to purchase something that I can't right now, it just means it's not meant for me right now. There's a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad that most people have heard. But the one that I really always tell people, if you really want to kind of dig deep and what your money relationship has been, or what you thought money was about, read the book Think and Grow Rich. There's so many different versions out there, but if you can find the original version, the fastest, by Napoleon Hill. And that was like a whole mindset of how we need to think about certain problems, right? And how we come up with a solution. And the moment we start telling ourselves the right thing, then it becomes a reality for us. As a 20-year-old something, I would have never thought I'd be a homeowner by the time, it was so-and-so. I never thought I'd have a nonprofit. I never thought I'd do these things. I knew I wanted them, but it was a goal that I had to tell myself, you know what, I'm getting there. I'm working something out. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there. And that type of talk did allow me to change where I am. And part of that mindset needs to start within, and it needs to start with the conversation. And it needs to also surround yourself with people that have that. And sometimes people are afraid to ask someone that looks like they're wealthy. And granted, wealth is not necessarily something that's flashy, right? Or someone that's, bling out, you could say. It's talking to those people that actually know what they're talking about, expertise. And that's part of what my podcast is, Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, talking about people's humble beginnings and where they are now. And the fact that most people be like, I would never think they're, basically have that much money. I go, because they don't flaunt it the way you think it would be. They don't spend it on things that don't bring them not only happiness or more of an investment. They really take their time to be mindful on how they're spending their money.
How did you become a real estate investor, and how can anybody else do it?
If someone that's starting out doesn't own anything, the best advice I got too is not only obviously the education, that start educating yourself on what it is to buy a property, but to just think of it as, okay, my first project is to find a place or a location that I'd be interested in investing in, right? Kind of breaking it down into little pieces. Say, if you can figure out just the number one thing first, is like, okay, what is it that I want to get out of it? Is it more of a rental income that I want, or is it something that I want as an adventure of, finding places that I'm selling, finding places that I'm keeping for a long term, finding a place that I can eventually live in, what my budget might be to begin with. And for most people, I understand the budget is non-existent, right? you don't have the money yet. But the point is that you start having a goal in mind, saying, you know what, in the next 2 years, I'm going to buy something. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how much I'm going to need yet, but my goal is in 2 years. So what happens is you start saving that type of money. And I said this on another interview where I'm like, I remember going to happy hour with my friends right out of college, and I limited myself to 2 drinks. I'm not a big drinker anyways, but I said 2 drinks because that 3rd drink and that 4th drink is going towards my real estate. But every time it starts to add up. So for someone that's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to buy a property, then start thinking, where can I use some of these little habits that I could change in order to really focus on saving some money for the down payment or working on my credit score, right? If you're afraid of, looking at your credit score, then you need to find someone that help you, will hold your hand and say, let's look at it together. Let's see what we can do to fix it. Because that's something I do all the time. I'm like, let's look at it. Let's fix it. And I mean, if you look at it step by step, it'll be a lot less overwhelming. And the cool thing is you'll get more excited when you learn something new. And I encourage people, look at a loan document. What does that look like, right? What are those terms? So that way the first time you see it, you're not like super overwhelmed.
And I think that by also getting your book, because I actually read it, it's awesome. It's really cool. And to
thank
the point,
you.
I think that everybody should definitely get it. It's a financially savvy in 20 minutes. And I think that literally is all the information that you need, not the fluff. Because there's a lot of books out there that it's just like, you're like, oh my God, just get to it. Like, right? This one is really to the point. I loved it. I was telling everybody, I was like, oh my God, you got to get this book.
And I like how you said, it's just the starting point. I think that's why, one of the reasons why I really wanted to write it, because I recommend people to, I'm like, oh, read the Tony Robbins or suzeorman or all these other financial gurus that people look at. And it's such an overwhelming, most of them are overwhelming books. They're like so much. And at the beginning, it was for college students that I wrote this. So I'm like, you don't have time to read another book on top of all the other text. So I wanted it to be something just like just straight to the point, a few things that I know for sure will make your college experience completely different and less painful when you have the students and how you're going to pay it down, right? So it's important for people to kind of get that grasp, to be excited about, okay, moving on to the next day, you get something more complicated, a little bit more complex. But yeah, so they can definitely contact me for that too.
Yes, and this is in Spanish as well? Do you have any?
There's a Spanish, I have the Spanish ebook. My second one, which is part of the Financially Savvy in 20 Minute series, is going to be How to Buy a Property at a Young Age. I actually co-wrote that with 3 other authors, and all of them were young investors in their 20s too. Not all of them are 20 now, but the fact that allowed to really hone in on all of our experiences and just kind of like what we overcame.
What you're doing is amazing. I wish that someone would be, let me teach not only you, but also teach your parents about it, right? And in their language, and just get the family together and really speak about how can you really reach the American dream, because at the end of the day, the American dream takes not only effort, because we know we have the effort as Hispanics, we have that drive. We have the determination because we come to this country to become better. But it's more of how do you actually finance it? How can you make it smarter and faster, right?
Right, absolutely. And it's true where I'm like, I wish I would have had this for myself too back then. I was going to say there is one thing I can share. The Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes podcast, I'm doing the Spanish one. I've been recording already. So it's financieramente inteligente, 20 minutos. And the English one is actually catered to self-made millionaires, those interviews. But the Spanish one is catered for those that are just doing really well financially. It doesn't mean that they're actual millionaires. But a lot of them, they have their own homes, they have real estate investments, and they have, their own businesses. And sometimes I think for Latinos particularly, I've noticed, you can't necessarily tell someone, oh yeah, you could be the next millionaire, because they almost don't believe that. But you can say, you know what, you can be the next person that's making 6 figures at the end of the year. That seems more attainable to them. So the Spanish one is actually I'm really proud of, because that's something that I'm like, we need to hear more Latinos tell their stories. Or some of them aren't even Latinos, they just speak Spanish. So that's why it's important to have. So hopefully your listeners can tune into that one too.
Don't forget to follow us and become an official Inspi. You could do it. Come on, follow us down here. Just say click, ping, so that way you could get notifications of all the interviews that we're having, so you can enjoy and really be inspired